Hey YouTube, I got my HTC One M9 today, and I thought what better way to celebrate its coming than to tear it apart and see how it works. So you can see that it's a nice phone. It looks a lot like the M8. We're going to use a couple tools here to get this started. A couple guitar picks to help us separate the back housing. Possibly this metal tool. We're going to try to avoid using it. Definitely don't want to scratch anything on a brand new phone. We'll need a SIM card tool to pop out the SD card slot and the SIM slot. We'll use a Phillips screwdriver. We'll also need a Torx 5 screwdriver. And then a nylon spudger as well. So the first thing that we need to do to open this device, or actually to start this repair, is go ahead and power the phone off. It's currently turned on. We're then going to need to use our eject slot tool to go ahead and pop out the two slots on the left and right side of the phone. Pull out the SIM card slot, then we'll work on the micro SD card slot here. The next step on this phone is to actually remove the screws that are holding the mid-frame to the rear cover here. To do so, we're going to use a guitar pick and just stick it right here in the middle of it. You'll see it kind of bulge open. You can wiggle your way down. It's actually held in with a couple of clips on the left and right side. Just be gentle as you pull it up. You don't want to damage these. It's got a little bit of adhesive underneath it. We're just going to gently pull it back. Once you have the one side unclipped, the following side will just pop right up for you. Go ahead and set that aside. Now we have our two screws here. These are the Torx 5 screws. You can see we have two, just one here and one here. Both will need to be removed to get into this device. Come out pretty easy. Go ahead and set those aside. Now the next step is a little bit trickier. We need to actually separate in between the mid-frame and the rear cover here. And I'm using a guitar pick to do this. Now I found that the easiest way is to actually use a spudger or a thick guitar pick up here in the corner. You'll see there's a little square area next to the screw hole that you can actually put a spudger into and twist. It'll actually start to separate. You can also use a guitar pick. You'll see me do here in just a few seconds to actually pop open the back cover just by sticking it in the seam. When it comes to comparing this to the M7 and the M8, it is 1,000 times easier to open. There's no adhesive holding it in, so I'll make it nice. So basically I'm going to stick my spudger in, and I'm going to twist it back and forth, and that'll cause the actual mid-frame here to kind of pop open a little bit, give us an extra crease in the seam. I'm going to use a little bit thicker guitar pick, and that'll go ahead and start us on opening this device. We're just going to roll it down. Now I thought initially that you had to press down into it like you did on the other ones. It's not as deep. You want to be careful of your power button and the volume button on the right hand side as well. It's just clipped in like the majority of phones out there. There's clips just actually right above the volume button, right below the power button to hold this side in. We'll go ahead and work on the opposite side. Try the guitar pick here as well and see if you can't break that seam in there. It's very, very tight. They did a great job of sealing this phone. See if we can get a little more loose on this side. Maybe we can get some leverage on the opposite side. The seam just right here at the corner is very difficult to actually get a pick into. And again, I believe the spudger is going to be the easiest way to actually open this seam. So again, just taking your spudger, sticking it into the slot, and then pushing up. You can see it separate right there. A lot easier on this side. Take your guitar pick or your opening tool and just slide it down the side. It does need to be dipped into the bottom of the case just a little bit to unhinge those clips. Now as you slide your pick down, you'll feel them unclip. You hear them snap and you'll see the seam start to separate. Now with that done, we can go ahead and pull the battery back off, and we can just pull upwards and out, and you'll see it just unclip for us. Now you can see the internals of this phone. Looks much like the M7, M8. It is just a ton of wires and cables on the inside. Now I'm going to show you just the back here. It clips down the side, and if you look very closely, you can see where it actually kind of snaps into place. A couple of clips on both sides. Just be careful of the volume and the power button. There's no clips on right in that area. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and get started on removing. The first thing we're going to go ahead and do is use our Phillips screwdriver and undo the battery connection on the phone. That'll reduce the risk of any shocking or damage to the phone itself. I do use metal tools. End up using a pair of tweezers and a dental pick. So to reduce that risk of doing anything wrong or damaging it, just go ahead and remove the battery first. Just use a nylon spudger, kind of pull up in the corner here. It'll unpop, just like those little ribbon cables that you see on a lot of phones. Now you can see down here that we have a charge port slot, a couple of cables running in, two wire cable connectors, and then you can see that we have a lot of Kapton tape over the ribbon cable connectors. Those slots just pull up and open. I'll show you how to remove those in just a few seconds. The first cable we're going to go ahead and undo is actually to the charge port slot below. Just pull back this little Kapton tape here. You don't have to remove it all the way from the cable. I find it easier to leave it on, that way you don't have to re-put it back down. Just pop up the little white slot connector on the front, and then you can go ahead and pull the ribbon cable just right out. We're going to go ahead and pop off these little wire cable connectors here. It's easier to get up underneath the back of it where the cable actually attaches. Just be careful with these, they are very easy to damage. So don't pry very hard, just give it a nice gentle push and it'll pop right out for you. Now with that done, we have this little cable connector for the bottom speaker. If you do need to remove some of this Kapton tape, sometimes it's easier just to put it back onto the phone so you don't lose it. Let's put it right here in the middle on this copper shielding here. You can go ahead and pull back, and that'll give us the loosening of the speaker cable in the back. We do have a screw right here underneath this Kapton tape as well. So we have a few screws down here. We have 3 screws for the charge port. We're going to go ahead and remove those now. These are all black screws. I like to separate my screws. I believe all 3 of these are the exact same length. They are Torx 5 size screws as well. With the exception of the 2 battery screws, all the remaining screws in this phone are Torx 5 screws. So now we have all 3 of those charge port screws set aside. This charge port cable down here will not come out until you remove the logic board as well as the bottom speaker here. So if you're looking to remove the charge port, you'll have to wait a few more seconds. We're going to undo the silver screw down here at the bottom that was underneath the ribbon cable for the bottom speaker. That'll let us remove more cabling without having to worry about removing the screws until we move further up the phone. We can go ahead and start to remove this tape across the back. This tape down here at the bottom, you actually want to leave this portion of the tape pressed down. It actually has the soldering point for the backlight on it. So you actually want to remove the tape from the logic board at the top side of the phone rather than from the bottom down here at all. We're just going to push this back down. We'll start right back up here at the top. Just go ahead and use the little gap in between the cable and the metal plate on the logic board to kind of pull it back a little bit. It is easy to use a pair of tweezers in this scenario. You don't have to. You can use just your nylon spudger to get this peeled up. We can go ahead and just peel this back. Work your way down. You want to be very careful as you're pulling back this tape. You don't want to damage the ribbon cable that's underneath it. It's right here at the top. And there's a black wire cable that runs underneath it as well. We can go ahead and undo the slot connector here. Make sure you use the flat side and pull straight up. You don't want to damage these. These can break fairly easy as well. So we now have the cable unconnected. We're going to do the little wire connector down here that attaches to the daughter board up at the top as well. Pop that off. It is stuck underneath some Kapton tape underneath this cable here as well. Pull back the Kapton tape on this one. It's got a little bit more difficult overlap on it. Now you want to be careful as you're using a pair of tweezers. There's a lot of little resistors on these boards, and you don't want to damage those. So just be very gentle as you're doing this repair. And that's the trick with these HTC phones, is take your time, be patient as you do them, and don't be forceful. Go ahead and pop up this ribbon cable connector here. You can undo this one that attaches to the daughter board as well. Need to peel back the Captain tape on this connector as well. We'll pull up the back side of the white slot connector here and pull this out. And then this next connector here actually runs underneath the logic board, so it can be a little bit tricky to get out of its slot. You want to be nice and gentle as you do it. You don't want to bend or damage this cable too much. So once you flip the connector up, I just stick my nylon spudger in, just pull back in kind of the curl that goes underneath the logic board. That'll help you pull it out. Alright, now we're making some pretty good progress. We have almost all of the connectors undone. We have a couple ribbon cable, or a couple wire connectors up here at the top of the board. And it looks like we still have our couple screws and a vibration module to remove. And go ahead and remove the silver screw up here at the top that holds in the logic board here. We have one right to the left of the camera as well. Now it may seem like there's not a rhyme or reason to removing these screws, but honestly in these HTC devices I find it easier to work my way from the bottom to the top. Now we have this little rubber grommet here that we can go ahead and pull back. It's actually covering up the little black wire cable connector. You can't actually remove it. It's got some tape that holds it onto the bottom side of the logic board. So we're just going to take this cable and try to move it around out of the way so we can remove this board out without damaging it. We have another grommet over here on this side that's actually holding a moisture detector, it looks like. So pulling this up, it's actually sitting on top of a little ribbon cable connector that snaps in place. So we're going to use a little nylon tool here to pull these cable connectors up before we start to remove this. Gives a little bit more ease to get this grommet off. Pulling back over next to the flash of the camera, we can go ahead and pull this back. This will actually, pulling this back, will actually let us remove the logic board before we remove that grommet. So we're going to take a look and see. Now they are notorious for putting some adhesive underneath the board. We're going to try it here at the top. It seemed like I wanted to wiggle here at the top a little bit. So we're just going to put our nylon spudger underneath and wiggle it back and forth. Now I'm noticing that this vibration module is actually soldered into the board. So we're going to need to remove that. I have this little hooked tool we're going to use to pull that out. Using a paper clip or something with a hook on it may make that a little bit easier to remove as well. So now with that pulled out, we can go ahead and remove the logic board here. I'm just going to twist it back and forth. Now just like on the M7, M8 phones, there's adhesive down here at the bottom that actually wraps around underneath the battery and is holding onto the bottom of the board. So we're just going to wiggle it loose a little bit here, see if we can't get this tape that's right where my finger just pointed out underneath the logic board to loosen a little bit. And kind of twist it back and forth. Then we can use our nylon spudger, see if we can't get underneath that tape just a little bit. Just wiggle it a little bit more. You'll hear it kind of start to peel off the kind of that popping sound the tape makes. Perfect. We'll put it underneath this side, and I can feel my spudgers on top of the tape, pulling it away from the board. Work your way down. You'll feel it start to loosen, and it's that silver tape just right on the battery there. Now we can see that our vibration module attached to a little tape that wraps around underneath that's holding that grommet on. Go and set that logic board aside. And now we're showing that we have a cable here that's actually overlapping on top of the battery that's holding the volume and the power button on. So we can't actually pull this up unless we remove the volume power button cable. We're going to hold off on that. We're actually going to go ahead and remove the components from the bottom down here. Now we're going to try to remove the bottom speaker here by putting our spudger in the loose spaces down here, just prying it back a little bit, see if we can't get it to start to gap. Give us a little bit of play underneath it. Now there is an actual little snapping connector right below the battery on the right side of the connector. You can see it just right in here. This connector. So we're just going to try to push that back and see if we can get a little play underneath it as well. Normally you can just pry it from the bottom right here and it'll open up. Just be nice and gentle as you wiggle your spudger back and forth. See if we can't get a little bit more push on that connector there. Perfect, there we go. Go ahead and pull it right out. It is actually attached to that adhesive right here, which is holding it in. With that free, we can go ahead and remove the charge port. So if you're looking to replace your charge port, you can stop right here in the disassembly and go ahead and replace your charge port and do the reassembly. Just showing you the speaker portion of that plastic we just removed. So now you can see we have a few wires here that go underneath the logic board or next to it. I'm going to try to pull up this grommet here and get it removed since it's on top of the cable connector. We can go ahead and just set that aside. You see that it goes right on top of this connection here. This cable connector is snapped in place. We're going to go ahead and just pop that up. It's just attached by a little tiny piece of tape here. You can go ahead and remove it and pull it off if you want to. Just going to push this tape back down on top of it. So now you can see that we have our power and volume button here. We need to go ahead and remove this to pull this cable back. So we're going to use a nice sharp tool to get underneath it. Start just right to the top of the power button. Being nice and gentle and really just using it to pull back the adhesive, not actually using the pointy part of it. Just being nice and slow to work our way up the cable. And pull that cable back. Now with that done, we can actually go ahead and start working on removing this battery. That'll give us a little bit more room underneath to see what we're working with here. Now these pull tabs, these look like pull tabs. They are not. They'll just rip off right away. So we're going to have to try to pry this battery up. Let's see if we can't find a good spot to start the prying. Normally has adhesive down the left and right side of it. Just work our way around, just being nice and gentle before we get started too much on this. You can put it right here at the top and see if this will work, right where the vibration module used to be. It looks like we can get a little gap in there. Got that started. We're just going to work on the side down here now. The nice thing about this battery, as you are prying it up, you're prying against the mid-frame of the phone, so don't worry about damaging the LCD behind it. So now we've got that happen, we can go ahead and push our spudger in all the way through, and to see if we can't use our fingers to kind of pull it up a little bit. It's a little bit tricky to get out. You try to not deform your battery as much as possible. You don't want to bend it. So we're just going to put our spudger in and then try to use it as a lever to kind of pull up. We're trying to get as much of the spudger underneath to give us as much surface area to pull up on as possible. You could also heat this up just a little bit if you want to. I wouldn't use a lot of heat, and it's fairly easy to remove without using heat as well. So now we've got a good start. We're just going to kind of pull it back a little bit, give it a little bit of positive pull there, and then just snap it right off. So it does have that little metal fabric tape down here at the bottom. It's still holding the battery in. You can see how it wraps around the entire battery. So we have our screen cables here for the digitizer and the LCD display. Alright, now we can go ahead and start working on this top area here. See what we have going on. There's like 4 screws that hold this daughter board in the top. This first one penetrates through this little fabric tape here, so it's going to be a little hard to remove unless you have a pair of tweezers or something to pull it out with. So it does have a ribbon cable connection underneath it. It's going to pull back this tape here. So it looks like this cable actually runs right into the micro SD card slot as well. It's a dual purpose ribbon cable here. Stuck back down on the battery adhesive. So we're just going to gently pull it up and get this cable pushed back just a little bit. Pull back the adhesive on this little connector here for the SIM card slot. Pull up the little connector, and you can just pull it out as well. So I'm going to move this Captain tape up here to the top. And I can get a better pull on it, on these little connections on the side, underneath the curl of it. Excellent, now we have that removed. We're going to undo the screw on this side. I believe these 4 screws are the exact same length as well. We have a screw up here in the upper right hand corner, and one on the opposite side. Now HTC does like to put adhesive underneath this connection here. Now, right where, this is the front facing camera, but right where I'm putting my spudger now, there's actually a little clip, one to the left and one to the right. There's a little bit of adhesive right across the top here, but normally if you pop these 2 black clips off, it'll make removing this board a lot easier. So I'm just trying to separate, find a good place to put my tool in to help us pop this open. Kind of put it in and just wiggle it back and forth a little bit. Trying to be careful. I don't want to damage this adhesive because I want to reuse it that's holding this logic board or this daughter board down. So it's working my way across the side here. You can feel that this is exactly where it's being stuck. Just twisting a little tiny bit each time, a little bit further in. You want to be very careful. This phone has a lot of antenna connectors that hit onto the back of the phone and to the front. So just take your time and make sure you look at where you're pulling at underneath. So the adhesive is pulling up. Now I'm trying to be very careful not to pull this too hard. Work our way on this side as well. Now it should be free. It looks like the camera has a little clip underneath it right here that's holding it in place. Try to wiggle that up a little bit. I'm actually going to unclip it. There's a clip just right here on the back side of the logic board, just like all the other kind of press-on connectors we have within this phone. So I'm just going to disconnect that and use that to pull it out. There we go. Perfect. You can see here's the back of the daughter board, and you can see there's a front-facing camera attached to it. You can see right here this black adhesive I'm using my spudger to kind of put back in place. This is what was holding that daughter board down, and there's 2 clips on either side of the front-facing speaker here. hold that board in place. So the camera here, it actually has this little clip in it that's holding it in place. I'm just going to try to pull it back a little bit here and see if we can't get this thing out. Push back on the clip, and that'll pop the camera right out for us. See, right here is the connector to the camera, just a snap-on connector. It actually looks like they've made the SIM card slot and the micro SD card slot removable, which would be awesome since these are normally hidden underneath the front display. We just very gently kind of pry against them so we can't get it out. They definitely look like they are removable. Just going to take my time to look at it, get the best angle of how to remove it. I don't want to damage these. Oh, it's actually pretty easy to remove. Just pops right up. And pull that whole ribbon cable connector off. So that's the SIM card slot volume cable combination cable. Let's do the same thing for the SD card slot here. Just kind of prying on the corner, trying to loosen a little bit. Now honestly, I did try to remove the display and it feels like it's actually adhered to the mid-frame, so if I get a broken screen I'll do that. I don't want to damage this screen. It feels like that's was going to be the next step to this. If you found this video useful, hit the like button. If you want to see future videos, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. As always, I appreciate you watching. Any questions, throw them down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. If you want to watch the reassembly video, I'll throw it down in the description. Thanks.